Okay, today I'd like to talk about introductory paragraph for the 5-paragraph essay. What does an introductory paragraph do? Well, an introductory paragraph introduces the reader to the topic that you've chosen to write your essay on. The most common types of introductory paragraphs that I've found are anecdotal, analogy, statistical, and example. What is an anecdote? An anecdote is a single example presented in a story-like or narrative format. So how do you do this? First, you need a topic. Okay, whatever your topic's going to be on. Obviously, popular topics are gun control, abortion, medical marijuana. So those are the topics you pick. You find an anecdote or story that should illustrate your topic. So like in the case of, let's say, medical marijuana, somebody would basically give an example of someone who got relief from it for their illness. So here's an example of an anecdote. Back when I was 7, I wanted to build a box trap to catch birds. However, I needed to put a notch on one end of a stick. To do this, I decided that the best cutting tool to use was a fillet knife. Not only did I use a fillet knife, but then I used a stabbing motion to notch the stick I was holding in my fist. Needless to say, I did an excellent job putting an inch-wide and 2-inch deep notch in the side of my hand between my thumb and index finger, and no notch in the stick. This is why safety gear and using the right tool for the right job are so important. So the last sentence there is the thesis statement. You can see it's a little story about how I stabbed myself in the hand when I was a kid. Okay? And so that's basically an anecdote. You don't want the story to get too long. You want it to be compact and tight. The next is an analogy. An analogy is a comparison based on partial resemblance. And so in other words, we are comparing two things that are alike. And that's key to remember, that they are alike. There is a warning though here. Analogies are for illustrative purposes only and do not constitute a form of evidence. So an analogy is never going to prove that you're right. It's just to help the person understand the concept. And you also want to be careful of false analogies. A false analogy is a comparison between two things that are nothing alike. And this happens a lot. Lots of times people will compare two things that have one thing in common, thinking that makes everything else in common. A very good example of this is when people compare government budgets to household budgets, or even government budgets to private sector budgets. They're not the same thing. A household doesn't print money. A household doesn't sell debt. A household doesn't do all the things that governments do. It also doesn't have the same amount of assets that a government has. It also doesn't have a military. So there's nothing similar between a household budget and a government budget, especially the national government's budget. And that's just an example of things that are compared that aren't the same. So here's an example of analogy. You can think of your brain like a computer. Working memory in your brain located in your hippocampus would be the RAM on your computer. Your long-term memories are the equivalent of your hard drive. And finally, your prefrontal cortex, right behind your forehead, would be your processor on the computer. Your 5 senses could be compared to a computer peripheral, such as a camera in place of your eye, speakers in place of your mouth, and a 3D printer would act like your hands. Computers progress when they become more like us. So the last sentence is a thesis statement, but it's kind of a lame thesis statement. The point is the comparisons. Statistical introduction provides statistics to demonstrate the importance of the issue. Statistics are excellent because they do provide evidence. Statistics, when you use them though, it's best to use both raw numbers and percentages. And that's because percentages provide some context for what we're talking about. Raw numbers, on the other hand, provide a sense of how large the issue is. So, for example, let's say you said 66% of all people enjoyed my pizza. Okay? Well, 66% is equivalent to 2/3. So 2 out of 3 people. So when you say 66%, are we talking about 2 out of 3 people? Or 3,000 out of 10,000, Well, that's not 66. 6,600 out of 10,000. Okay, that's the difference. So currently PTSD is an important topic in our country. Each year, thousands of veterans from the Afghanistan and Iraq wars come home suffering from PTSD. According to the Congress Research Service in a report entitled U.S. Military Casualty Statistics, Operation New Dawn, Operation Iraqi Freedom, and Operation Enduring Freedom, authored by Hannah Fisher, between the years 2000 and 2010, over 87,000 soldiers were diagnosed by the military with PTSD. What makes the problem worse is that many veterans do not report their symptoms or try to manage them on their own. For this reason and others, I feel that exercise in the form of mountain biking would be an excellent therapy for treating veterans and others who suffer from PTSD. So we're talking about post-traumatic stress disorder here. And so here's my statistic in the middle, 87,000. Okay. Now I could have said, looked at how many overall all soldiers and then divided it and came with a percentage, but I think that 87,000 is a lot. Okay, regardless of what's going on, because they served our country and they deserve to be treated for what they have acquired while serving their country. So I think just the 87,000 is important, but I could have put a percentage in, and if I would rewrite it, I would. An example paragraph. An example introduction provides examples of what you are talking about, and the paragraph is really just a list with comments on each examples. So businesses often complain about the size of government, but a simple search at the website recalls.gov using the search term lead paint brings up a list of 1,147 products. Of course, at the top of the list is Mattel for a Barbie recall from 2008. More recently, 2012, Dillon Importing had to call their Captain Cutlass pirate toy guns because they violated lead paint standards. Think that only toys violate lead paint standards? Think again. In June of 2012, two companies, Blue Stem Brands and Tone World International, were forced to recall their recliners because of a lead paint violation. However, without the government and its size, businesses would be indifferent to our rights and markets would start to fail. Yeah, the last sentence is lame. It's a thesis statement. But again, what we're looking at is the examples. Mattel, Dillon Importing, the Captain Cutlass pirate toy guns, Blue Stem Brands, Tone World International are the companies, and the recliners are the example of what was violating the lead paint standard. So, those are your examples. So what to do now? Read the paragraphs again. Notice how they're organized, and then replace the information there with your own and reword and rewrite. Good luck. I'm Michael Langdon, and I'm Learning Engineer. Bye.